All right, folks, on today's video, we're gonna go over the care and maintenance of natural material bows, and that includes self bows, board bows, natural laminated bows, and we're even gonna talk about rawhide and sinew backed bows, so stick around. So when you get into the world of natural material bows, we're talking about self bows, board bows, bamboo backed Osage or Ipe type situations. There's going to be some things that you need to know about the care and maintenance of those bows that doesn't really apply to the modern laminated fiberglass bows. I've got a list of things here that we're going to go through, and I want to run down this list. I want to run down this list really quick so that you'll know what to expect in this video, and then throughout the video we're going to talk about each one of these things in turn. The first thing we're going to talk about is the difference between the types of wood, Osage versus hickory and things like that. We're going to talk about the different sealers that you can use and how well they hold up and how well they perform. We're going to talk about the weather effects on bows, how long you can leave them strung without having any adverse effects on them, holding at full draw versus snap shooting, the brace height, how to store, the conditions that you need to store these bows in, and then we're going to talk about a little bit more detailed things like summertime, leaving these things in a hot car. And once we get all that done, we're going to talk a little bit about sinew and rawhide back bows. So let's get started. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the differences between wood species that you're going to be making your bows out of. The bow that I have here is made out of Osage orange. It's a very popular bow wood. It's a very good bow wood. And it's also a very dense wood that is affected by humidity at a pretty low rate, as far as it takes a long time for unsealed Osage to change its moisture content in response to the relative humidity. Now, you take a wood like hickory, on the other hand. Hickory responds very rapidly to relative humidity. And so if you have a hickory bow that's not sealed very well and you take it out and you start shooting it in high humidity or a light rain or something like that, you're going to notice a major difference in the performance of that hickory bow from a dry condition to a wet condition. And so that just highlights the importance of a good sealer on these bows. Now, a lot of guys that are making these bows for sale are using True Oil, and that's what I've been using for the last couple of years. It works very well, and if you put, I usually try to put 7 or 8 coats of True Oil on these bows, and once you get that done, they're pretty much impervious to the weather. The bows that I make, I have hunted these things everywhere from, conditions in North Idaho that's very, very cold, and then also just a cold, wet, like a heavy snow, and then also down here where I'm at now in Florida, where you might have 80% humidity, and the bows shoot the same whether I'm out there and it's cold and wet, or it's hot and dry, or hot and wet. I don't see any difference in performance, and I think that's primarily because I do seal my bows up very, very well. There's other sealers that you can use if you want to do a more primitive style thing. I've seen where guys have used beeswax, tallow, things like that. If you're going to go that route, you need to probably carry some with you and just apply it pretty much every day, especially if you're in conditions where you're using your bow on a daily basis and you're out in the field hunting or something like that and kind of beating it around, because those type of natural water repellent things like that, they just kind of wear off. And the last thing you want to do is go out in a really wet condition and have your bow start soaking up moisture and change the way that bow is going to be shooting. So one of the things that I get questions about when people see how I shoot my bows versus how most guys that are shooting their bows is when I shoot my self bows, I shoot them with a very methodical shooting style. So I draw and hold and aim, and that's in contrast to a lot of guys that are shooting self bows. A lot of guys are snap shooting, where they get their aim or whatever they're doing. If they're instinctive shooting, they're pointing towards the target, and they draw and shoot it all in one fluid motion. I don't do that. I've tried to shoot that way and I just don't shoot that way very well. And so when I shoot my bows, I draw back, anchor, aim, and I might sit back there for 3 or 4 seconds. And I have, while I'm out hunting, I have held these bows for 10 or 15 seconds at full draw. Now, you'll hear guys say, well, that decreases the performance of the bows. You know, it stresses the bows. It's better to shoot a self bow with a snap shooting type of style. And I would say that partially I agree with that, because if you snap shoot a self bow, you can pick up a little bit of performance, because when you draw these bows and hold them at full draw, this wood starts to settle in to that bend. But on the other hand, I shoot much better when I do that. And so I'm not willing to trade my accuracy and consistency in shooting for a little bit better performance. When I say better performance, I'm talking about a couple of feet per second probably. And so I build my bows to be shot the way that I shoot them, which is with a methodical shooting method: drawing, holding, anchoring, back tension, the whole thing. And I've never experienced any performance, long-term bad effects on the bows from shooting that way. And you can see this one, I mean, I've shot this bow a couple hundred times and it's still got, I don't know, 3 inches of back set or something like that. Now this does have sinew underneath this snake skin, but I've made self bows, I've made lots of self bows that spring right back to a back set even after drawing and holding that way. And so don't think that drawing and holding your bow is gonna be necessarily a bad thing to do with your self bows. You can do that. It's not gonna hurt them in the long term, unless you get into a situation where you just have a high moisture content or something like that. That's gonna cause them to take set, but that's a whole nother issue. The other thing that I get questioned about sometimes is, how long can I leave my bows strung? And again, it's one of these trade-off things. I've heard of guys hunting with their bows unstrung, like being in the woods hunting with the bows unstrung, and then when they see an animal, they string their bow and shoot. You could do that, but you're not gonna see me walking around in the woods when I have a chance of seeing an animal with my bow unstrung. I elk hunt in the mountains, and sometimes I leave our camp at 4:30 in the morning, and I don't get back until 9 o'clock at night, and my bow is strung. If I'm into elk, or I think there's a chance of me seeing elk, my bow is strung the whole time. And it'll be like that day after day after day after day. And so I string it up when it gets shooting light, and I unstring it when it starts to get dark, and it's strung the entire time. I don't leave it strung overnight. That's a no-no. So unstring it at night, absolutely. And then also, if I'm during the day, if I come back to camp or something like that, I'm gonna unstring my bow. I'm gonna unstring it any time when I think that there's no chance that I'm gonna see an animal, and just let it rest. Let's talk about brace height, because that can have an effect on how much stress you place on these bows. So the brace height, for the bows that I make, the brace height that I use is somewhere, I usually try to set it between 6 and 6.5. Now, brace height is another one of those trade-off things, because the higher you get it, you have less tendency to slap your wrist. You can use your brace height, you can raise it up to affect the tuning of the arrow, things like that. But if you get it high, really high, like 7 and things like that, it just holds the bow into more of a bend. It's more stressful for the bow. And it also makes the bow less efficient, because your power stroke, the amount of time that the arrow has on the string from full draw to resting is decreased if your string is resting up here versus down here. Now, I feel like 6 to 6.5 is a good trade-off. because it gives you a good long power stroke. It's high enough so that you're not popping your wrist all the time, and it gives you some leeway for tuning your arrows. But the biggest thing is a low brace height for a self bow or a natural material bow is just going to be less stressful on the bow, because the bow is being held in that bend all day long if you're hunting with the way that I just described. So where to store these bows? I don't put a lot of thought into where I store my bows. There's a couple of things that I do pay attention to. One is, like, we have a wood stove in our house in North Idaho, and if you have something like that where it's a really warm, dry area, you want to be careful about storing it right up next to the wood stove, because you could drive the moisture down so low and make the bow brittle. But then on the other hand, you don't want to store it somewhere where it's going to be in a humid situation. So what I would say is, just like everything else, store in a cool, dry place and it's going to be fine. Now, I've heard guys say that you want to store them horizontally versus hanging vertically. I don't know what the argument is behind that. I just take mine and I have a peg right by my back door where I hang it on, and I just hang it from the top loop here. My string just fits down over the limb tip, and it creates a little thing, and it just hangs just like that. I've never seen any negative effects of that. I've seen where other guys just make bow racks and they store them like this on the wall. Either way is going to be fine. Just don't store them strung. All right, so in the summertime, like if you're going to a 3D shoot or something like that, I would be cautious about leaving your bow in a hot car, because the inside of a car can get terribly, terribly hot for long periods of time. If you leave it in there for a day, it's not going to be a problem. You leave it in there for, a week at 140 degrees inside that car, and that could cause some problems. The other thing is, if you leave it in there and it's really hot in that car, I would pull it out, let it cool off before you string that thing. I've never tried this to see if it would actually cause the bow to take some set, but I feel like if you pull the bow out of a car that's really hot and it's hot to the touch, and then you strung it, could cause that bow to take some set. And we want to do everything that we can to avoid set. When I say set, what I'm talking about is string follow, or having the bow stay bent when you unstring it. All right, and the last thing that I want to talk about is rawhide and sinew-backed bows. Now, this bow that I have here, this does have a thin sinew backing on it, and then this is covered with snake skin. Other bows that I've made are backed with rawhide, and a lot of the board bows that I see made are backed with rawhide. It's a great backing material, very tough, very durable, but you do need to seal it well, because especially sinew can be, if it's not sealed well, it can be very susceptible to humidity and wet weather. Now, my sinew bows, I'm in Florida right now. People are very hesitant to hunt or to build sinew bows in high humidity areas because of that. But I've hunted these things, like I said, everywhere from cold, wet, hot, dry North Idaho to muggy, hot weather down here in Florida, hog hunting. And I've hunted these sinew bows down here, never had a problem because I seal them up very well. Now, I'll probably cover this more in depth on another video, but what I do for my sinew is I put the sinew down, and then I take a layer of Titebond 2 or Titebond 3, which is a waterproof wood glue, and I go over the sinew, let that cure, and then if I'm gonna snake skin it, then I go over with the snake skin and sand all that stuff down, and then once that's all cured, then I go over it with my my sealer, which is True Oil. Just about forgot what that stuff was called. And so then again I put on 5, 6, 7, 8 coats of True Oil, And once that's done, these things are pretty much impervious to the weather. I think that pretty much covers everything. I probably have left something out. If you think of anything that people need to know about the care and maintenance of these natural material or organic bows, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll try to, maybe if you leave something that I've left out, I'll put it at a sticky, or I'll make it a sticky and leave it up towards the top so everybody can see that. But with that, we are getting ready to head back up to Idaho, so you guys are going to see some more videos from up there. Going to get into some shooting videos. I'm going to be breaking down my whole shot sequence, and so if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that, and we'll see you guys next time.